Hey YouTubers, I just wanted to create a video to maybe create some introspective thought on confidence and our perspective of ourselves. Like how to maintain self-love and maintaining self-respect. So, uh, so you have to sometimes ask yourself, why do we feel we sometimes need to give our power or our sacred relevance over to someone else rather than just rely on ourself, our own wisdom from day to day? We are definitely social animals, yes. Social animals that compare and prorate ourselves within our immediate and chosen wolf pack or community. But is someone else's opinion more important to you than your very own? How much of your very sacred value do you put into other people's care and into other people's judgment? Do you put judgment of your own wisdom, of your own morality in someone else's power? When can we value and trust our own judgment? When is it enough? Do we trust and value our own ability to be able to determine truth all by ourselves? And if not, why can't we see the truth or validity of our own opinion sometimes? Why might we not allow or maybe permit ourselves to see truth or validity in our own opinion and always look externally, always look outward to other people? Why can't we just simply trust ourselves enough to be able to be right once in a while, let alone all the time like other people? But why can't we just be right once in a while, and why can't we trust that? I think real courage begins when you're able to stand in front of someone else's assertion and say, no, that's not quite true, sir. That's a false conclusion because you're not considering X, Y, or Z, different variables. And further explain that merely saying it again more loudly doesn't mean you're correct. I already heard you the first time. I'm just not convinced. And just because you try saying it with anger also doesn't make it more correct either. So your need to be loud or your need to be correct is a bit suspicious. Why do you feel so strongly about that thing or who I am? Why do you feel so strongly? What does it say more about you than it says about me? What are your motivations? Let's put it all on the table now. Maybe you're afraid of something or angry about something when you're criticizing someone or their ideas. Maybe your insecurities and your anger, they just don't make things true. So where does one find the strength or the courage to give yourself confirmations or affirming that you have good nature and your perspective, your opinion is valid? When do you draw the line in the sand when other people's criticisms are valid and just not depend on yourself? Why do you feel the need to defend yourself from other people, because of other people? Especially when you know that they're true. And if not exactly true, at least your opinion may not be pre-soaked in anger or in pity or whatever meme your opponent is using to make their point. And just because someone can physically hurt you doesn't mean they're correct. Just because someone wants to fight you and injure you doesn't destroy the fact that your opinion stands. Your opinion has merit. Your opinion matters. Physical action isn't going to change the validity. Defend yourself, take precautions, but physical violence doesn't make your opinion less valid. It just amounts to intimidation and assault. Call it what it is. Call out the bullcrap for the weakness that it is. And sometimes you just have to realize some people are self-centered, nutty creatures at the moment. They're just bereft of logic, bereft of compassion, may not be all that trustworthy. Only you have the divine right of judging yourself. You have the right of judgment of yourself only. Even then, you should question whether it's fair what you are judging yourself for. Be objective. From my own past history, my intention after finishing off high school was to head off to university, to become some miraculous counselor to the masses, to bring peace and joy to people in conflict, and those who would viciously battle each other. My hope was to help people resolve their differences safely and constructively. But I didn't quite end up being a very effective student. I did struggle academically. I suspect I even battled some learning disabilities, and I never had the courage, maybe the determination, or the self-validation to think I merited looking into any undiagnosed disability. Instead, I felt a bit of shame. Shame for not being able to do everything for myself by myself, when it seemed everybody else was already doing fine, all on their own, without much effort. I always felt like I was that last kid in line trying to keep up with the bigger crowd, knowing somehow that I just wasn't quite enough, didn't measure up. Now, I seem to have displayed some ego for a kid who had no ego at all. No pride. Lack of pride, perhaps. More like embarrassment. I always suspected I also had dyslexia, because I would be writing things down and I would transpose some letters or start sentences off without the first letter of a word, which was odd. Why was it missing? Why was it transposed? So it was kind of like my brain wasn't communicating with itself fully or completely. Or at least it wasn't completely enough with my hand doing all that writing. And it would also seem that I had an attention problem in addition to all of that. Whether it was attention deficit or attention hyperactivity, it was simply hard to focus. And it was also hard to understand words being spoken to me or words being spoken in the classroom. I noticed how I was always managing to find two different ways of hearing a simple sentence coming out of a speaker's mouth. And I kind of learned that words can usually have two meanings, a double meaning in life, whether by intent or by accident, behaviorally, from a speaker. And note that the shorter our sentence we use, the more ambiguous the possible meanings of that sentence can carry. So, words add definition. The more words, the better. There's less ambiguity in shorter sentences, and you have to consider that when speaking or listening. I think because when I was a child, I was always under attack or criticized, and that led me to try to find any meaning at all or any reason that might explain why the aggression was being used. I was always replaying in my mind what just happened or what was just said that would lead to such a malicious interaction. Unfortunately, I was always looking inward to myself as an antecedent or the cause. What had I said that was so triggering? Realizing usually it's your attacker that's more the unstable element in an interaction, as long as you keep your composure and try to find meaning in what's being said or heard. Sometimes the instability is not yours. And I found when I was younger, as a child, my attacker had definite anger issues and took them out on me because, I don't know, I guess I was just accessible and accessible without consequences. I was too young to the fact that other people are in charge of their own emotions, and I had nothing to do with their emotions. My participation was minimal, or even irrelevant at that. Sad fact is, if you can't ultimately realize or be objective about what's true or not true, whether due to age or emotionality, you may start just condemning yourself for your interactions, becoming a self-fulfilling prophecy, a prophecy of hate, condemnation, and failure. Now there comes a point in your life when you have to take that bullet and just say, F you, no more. I won't permit hate and abuse to dictate my future. That past, which may be regrettable, tragic, and very sorrowful, is the past. It's not now. No more BS. All I have is my now, my never-ending now. And we're going to try something different, something proactive. In the past, I felt like I had no power. I had no right to claim a different direction. And I continued to let life just play me. I just followed along a miserable path saying, whatever life was going to do to me, just do it to me, go ahead. Let it send what little scraps of fun or enjoyment or dignity it would throw me. And that became my abject fate. I resigned any responsibility for my future or my faith. I relegated myself to just being sort of an observer in the world rather than authentically owning or participating in the world. So much for those aspirations of being a world-class counselor. Wasn't off to a good start. And how was I going to be helping other people when I could barely help myself? I could barely take responsibility for my own life. University was a challenge. And for so long I'd fallen into the pattern or the paradigm of being a people pleaser. I derived my personal validation out of making other people well or happy rather than making myself happy first. It was like relegating yourself to being a second-class citizen, someone who had to wait their turn to get help. This led to the realization that I had betrayed myself for not standing up for myself, for not putting myself first and foremost, not putting myself upright as valid first, for not being worthy of being first, at least in my own world, but still expecting perfection from others, within others. And perfection is a funny thing. usually comes with the trade-off of something else. Someone who's really good at one thing usually has something else deficient within them. No person is 100% perfect. And I think the perfection label is more of a function of doing rather than being. Doing doesn't let people know who you are. It only shows them what you are by your actions. You can hide or get lost in the doing. Imperfection is more like the ingredients of a unique recipe anyway. Imperfection can leave a bad taste in your mouth, but imperfection can also turn out to be true genius. The point to be made is that just because you haven't fully or formally trained yourself with skills to become a PhD in counseling or a cordon bleu trained chef has no bearing on your ability to counsel or create valid recipes. The bottom measure should be, was a message or a perspective received by the person you're communicating with? Or was your recipe well received? Did your counseling or your recipe open the door for someone? Open it for them to take further? Did it benefit them? Was it a catalyst for them? There are varying degrees of right and wrong in this life, and precious little is ever completely right or completely wrong. It's usually somewhere, something to be learned somewhere in the full contrast of right and wrong, this opinion or that opinion. And egos are the enemy of communication. They're the enemy of receiving new messages. Sadly, the only thing worse than having an obnoxious ego, abusive ego, is not having one at all. Now, ego doesn't have to be your handicap. There can be balance. There can be a workable medium found. Ego seems to be like the eyeglass prescription that we choose to view our world through. Sometimes we never choose to upgrade or update the prescription. We just live with the old one that we're used to, no matter how painful or unproductive. Sometimes we demonstrate a little flair when buying the frame, and that shows that you're not afraid now to show who you are. Some of our chosen eyewear or chosen prescription allows us to sometimes disappear into that toxic office setting or into a toxic fraternity or whatever setting, just an example. Some people even go so far as to torture themselves by getting contact lenses so that no one ever knows that they need glasses. My advice is just be mindful of that recipe, that prescription, eyeglass prescription, or the formal training or informal training that you use in developing your own ego. Educate your ego gently. Create a really flexible palette or a perspective or an outlook on life, which is always changing, because life is always changing. Your self-speak will definitely change as you move from younger to older. The world will keep changing. Will you change along with it? Or will you stay irrelevant, outdated, anachronistic, damaged? Anyway, thank you, YouTube family. Hopefully this opens perspectives for you. God bless, be well. But most importantly, be nice to yourself. Love yourself first. God bless.